Let's now talk about hundreds of firearms specialists because they've left the Metropolitan Police in less than a year after widespread anger over an officer being charged with the murder of Chris Kaba. Between April and December 2023, the force has lost more than 250 authorised firearms officers, and that's about 1 in 10. In a moment, I'll speak to retired Metropolitan Police Superintendent Leroy Logan here in the studio. But first, somebody who knows all about this, it's Harry Tangye, former armed response officer and author. Harry, very good evening to you. Welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Are you surprised that so many officers have left?
No, not at all. I think they're thinking, well, what else can they do? Are they seriously going to risk being charged with murder now? They've always known that they are open to be judged in the eyes of the law. That's always the case. But they've always hoped that they would be treated differently from some random, say, gang leader or a bank robber who then shoots a member of the public, to actually comparing it with them, professional police officers, huge amount of training, and actually shoot 0.05% of the time, 1 in 2,000 firearms incidents. So they're not trigger happy. And they're just voting with their feet. And you think it's just London. It won't be just London, I can assure you. Maybe when London sneezes, the rest of the country catches a cold. They are very nervous, armed response officers are now. And they think, well, actually, I can cut this risk out. And their family's saying, you can cut this risk out. I don't want you being with that, doing that job anymore. It's thankless. And the chances are, as opposed to a couple of years ago, you now have a huge amount of chance of being judged from above. I get the idea, sorry to whittle on here, but I get the idea, and this is what people are telling me, that because of social media and communication, that decision's being shoved up a bit more in the interests of public interest. And, well, they don't need to do that. So they're not. They're going to do a job where they don't risk being charged with murder.
So, Leroy, welcome to the show. I mean, do they leave the police force altogether? Do they go and do different jobs in the police? And do you have sympathy for these guys?
Well, first, let me say, I'm not a firearms officer, but as a senior leader in the Met for 30 years, I know the need for them. They're very expertise, very dedicated, like Harry. And it is, to some extent, a thankless task. Like policing, it
in
is
general,
right across the board.
Particularly at the moment,
it is a thankless task. But no, but they're handing in their ticket. So that basically means they go back to other duties and not in the armed response vehicles or specialist firearms officers, because they're the ones that are called on when they're dealing with a violent person or an armed person, and it's commensurate with the risk. But as Harry said, everyone knows that when you apply for these jobs, even if you don't shoot and kill someone or you shoot and injure someone, you will be subject to scrutiny. Now, the Crown Prosecution Service, they have their internal CPS who look at these things, and so they do know the nuances of being a firearms officer and the challenges they have to face. And as a result of that, they will be very, very careful on not just leaving those officers out to dry, much less than putting it forward for the case to go to court. And invariably, it's not always just the public interest. It's around, is it proportionate? Is it necessary? And is that action accountable? And one of the main forms of accountability is being put to the courts.
But that's one of the problems, isn't it, Harry? Because the whole reason for an awful lot of people leaving is this identification situation, isn't it, with the killer or the police officer who shot Chris Kaba. I mean, we had an incident just in London a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even last week, down in Surrey Quays, where an intruder was trying to get into a home. The armed police were called. They shot him dead. That officer is now presumably being investigated and isn't working.
And they understand that. And in the old days, I was involved with post-incident management with post-shootings. I was in firearms for 23 years and VIP protection and so on. We all understood that in the old days, you'd get the, detective superintendent come along and treat it like a murder because that's the only way they knew to do it, how to do it, to investigate it. Then they suddenly realised that police officers really should be treated as witnesses until there is some evidence to show that, nah, this is really different. This is somebody who's gone renegade, who's just gone off on one and randomly shot someone, or there's been involved in a domestic incident and involved something. That's clear, and that will be quite clear early on. But when you've got a spontaneous incident like the one you've just mentioned, fast flowing, bang, 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 and they will have been trained on that time and time again. And a lot of the time, a lot of these exercises they're given is, well, are they suffering from mental health? Are they autistic? Okay, well, just change your tone now on your challenge, and then let's see if we can not rush them into a decision if we don't need to. It's very much involved in it. 14-week course, and it was 50% failure rate until they were very, very much stricter on the selection. So these are very, very skilled officers, and they just want to be treated like they want to treat it really as witnesses, always be judged by the law. But the fear now, this is out to precedent now. Okay, now they're worried. I don't want this, because you don't want to be a copper in a prison, especially when you've been firearms, been nicking the worst people in our society. You don't want to be there. And even if they're cleared at a jury and whatever, that is 2 years, 3 years of hell.
So in your view, then, should they not be naming this officer in the Chris Kaba case?
Well, I say, why are they naming him, right? And the judge said they can see no reason why it couldn't be mitigated. And I looked up the word, because I use mitigate quite a lot, but the definition was basically to minimize a bad circumstance. We can avoid the bad circumstance by not naming him. What are we achieving here, apart from a bit of voyeurism? Why are we naming him? Because his kids, if he's got kids and they're in school and they're young and whatever, they're going to say, oh, your daddy's a murderer. This is what happens to friends of mine that have been involved in shootings. And then you've got some of the most violent people in society who are not most friendly with police, knowing where they are. And the judge said, well, we're not going to give his date of birth or his address. I'm sorry. Really? 2024?
I mean, that's not exactly a safeguard, is it? Leroy, what do you think about this identification process?
Well, I mean, that's the court's interpretation. You know, it's not like the Met have said, divulge his name. I mean, I was investigated in the Met 20-odd years ago. And my name is tried by media. Well, it didn't go to court, but my name was out there. And my youngest son, he was 10 at the time, sorry, 11, just started secondary school, and he was told, oh, your dad's a prisoner, or he's going to be going to prison, and he's dishonest. And so I know the impact of that. And I do feel for the officers. Even this officer involved in Chris Kaba's case. But it's like everything. I would like the CPS and the courts are dealing with this. This is not senior leadership, and unfortunately, we can't judge how the courts are going to do this. They're seeing it. Is it in the public interest? And because of these circumstances, they're putting out his name. I wish
presumably it got to the court because the police said that there was a problem with the way that the shooting happened. So they put him in the frame, haven't they?
No. But they have to investigate it, the internal investigation, and then that goes to the CPS, and the CPS then decide if there's a good chance of securing a conviction, and then that goes to the courts. So if you've got a problem, it's with the CPS, who then put it to the courts. And the courts
I would say, I'd ask Harry. Harry, would you say that that's the fault of the police who have put him up in place as a sort of...
It's nothing to do with them, because when there's a shooting, you get an initial investigating officer that just holds the scene, makes sure that you've got the witnesses, that the scene isn't contaminated, and then that's very quickly taken over by the IOPC and take it on from then on. And the police have very little, they don't have any dealings with it at all. What I would say is there needs to be some stronger leadership, and that is what resources like officers feel is hugely missing. Thrown under the bus. There's no specific complaint that the police have put them in a position where they're being charged, all right? But they do sort of think, whenever this is happening, it's like senior officers immediately thinking, oh, careers, we've got the people who shout the loudest and perhaps haven't got the best to say, they've got other intentions, and they just go quiet, and they say nothing. And they just need a little bit more support, and to say, no, these officers are trained. We've got to wait to the end of it. And they don't even summarize it by saying we've got to wait to the end of it because, but we have full faith in our officers, training and things like this, that and the other. There has to be an investigation. But there's nothing. There's very little.
And that's where the problem is, Leroy. It seems to me that, you know, maybe you're going to say the same thing happened to you, but they're not. It doesn't seem like they're protecting their own. It seems like they're kind of throwing them to the wolves. And I know there's a process, I get that, but it seems that the police could be more on side with their own officers.
Well, I know that the Commissioner, Mark Rowley, he had a meeting with all the firearms officers, all the main representatives of various units, and discussed it with him and he said, he was reassured them that his name would not be divulged. And again, but it's not in his gift to do that. I know that they are even going down the road of saying, judge firearms officers like how you judge a doctor. Right. It's more on neglect. And so they're looking at that sort of framework of assessing where things have gone wrong. Because I know if you look at it very, very clinically, forgive the pun, the proportionate and necessary and accountable piece might not always lend itself to a fast-moving, instant reaction. Right. And of course, someone ending up dead. So I know that they're doing that, but that's going to take time. Yeah. But I would like to think the officers will reconsider because we need them, and because certain people are very violent, as we know from even the Clapham Common incident with the alkaline attack. So we've got some really violent people. Would you have
more police armed than there are?
I don't think it's just about numbers. I think we need certain iconic sites, you know, transport hubs, airports, all these sort of people. We need firearms officers there, and we need real intelligence to deploy officers at the right place at the right time. So it's not just about numbers. I think a lot of it is around prevention before cure. Yeah. You know, we have to get that early intervention work to prevent people to even want to carry a knife or a gun. Yeah. So I think it's both. We need your deployed specialist officers, firearms and otherwise, and then you need your community cops to get in there to spot these people before they get tooled up and want to use it.
Well, exactly. Well, Harry, let me end with you. I mean, we are living in a much more violent society. You know, do we need more police officers to be armed? And also, if we are losing this many, are we actually at some kind of risk now?
The pressures are huge as an armed response officer because you're constantly being assessed. 4 days intensive training, and then I was a firearms tactics advisor, firearms and operational firearms commander. So more training, more experience. If you've lost those, you've got a lot of making up, and it's going to take you 8 years before you get there. I sort of disagree with Leroy there because it's not the prime sites that need to be. Where the most violence occurs is in an ordinary street in the middle of our village, in the middle of our towns and cities. And you need the numbers just to cover the shifts, because you've got some in the county forces where you are traveling. I would be on a blue light run for an hour, you know, and so if you, and I've even directed officers onto the helicopter to be dropped off with a Panda car to collect them, to get them to a scene quicker, where some guy was putting the machete through a traffic jam full of windscreens. So you just, it is numbers. It's really important. Maintaining, getting the right people who are in the population enough to produce those. So it's not all London, obviously. And then they pass the training continually, and they're ready to put up the stress. And a minor thing is, I got migraines all the time when I was in the police. When I left, I haven't had one since. And that shows something. They just want backing, and they just don't want to be hung out to dry, not necessarily by police officers, by the senior officers, which is shocking. They're more managers than leaders in a lot of cases, not all, of course. But they just want to be treated like witnesses, professional witnesses, unless, of course, it's absolutely obvious.
Yeah. Harry, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Harry Tangye, Leroy Logan as well. Nice to see you. One of those situations that we'll need to talk about some more, it would seem to me. We do, I think, need many more police officers in general, with the streets getting as dangerous as they now are.